I'm happy to introduce Christine and Renata from Bankers Without Boundaries. They're stepping in to represent ASEN in today's session. So both Christine, Zhou, and Renata Haseth, as I mentioned, are from Bankers Without Boundaries, and they will be presenting a tool that will also be used during the small group discussions in the next part of today's masterclass. So to our experts from Bankers Without Boundaries, the floor is yours, please. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Juliana. Would you like us to share the slides, or is that either way is fine?
Yeah,
I think Renata is going to bring them
that's
up.
fine if you're comfortable doing it.
Cool. So just while we're bringing up the slides, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much to FMDB and to UNCDF for inviting us here today. As Juliana mentioned, my name is Christine Zhou. I'm an Executive Director and Head of Built Environment Finance at Bankers Without Boundaries. And myself and my colleague Renata will take you through the presentation today before you'll actually get a chance to meet some of our other colleagues in the small group sessions as well. So thanks. Maybe if we jump to the next slide. Great. So before we get into the details, a quick summary of what to expect from the presentation today. So I will start with a brief introduction of who we are, the type of work we do with cities, and then I'll set the context of the framework that we will focus on today, the City Project Finance Framework, before handing over to Renata to introduce that to you in more detail. Later on, then, after the small group sessions, I'll then round us up with some key conclusions and next steps for cities. Great. Brilliant. Next one as well, actually. Fab. So who are we, just briefly? So we are Bankers Without Boundaries. We're a not-for-profit financial advisory and capital raising firm. We're focused on environmental and social projects globally. So we work with a lot of cities, with multilateral development banks, development institutions, sovereign governments, to name a few. And typically we come from finance backgrounds. So we're not technical or environmental experts, but the majority of us have worked in investment banks or asset management firms. So our goal really is to bring that very practical financial experience to cities and to other partners to support them in their decarbonisation journeys and provide better links between the public sector and private capital providers. So ultimately, the aim is to facilitate more capital flow between the two as well. Next slide, please. So within the urban environment specifically, which is most relevant here today, these are some examples of the types of initiatives that we work on with cities and a few of the projects and partners that we've been engaged with. So I'll just touch on each of them very briefly. Firstly, urban investment planning. So this is a very top-down approach that we take with cities, where we work with them to take their climate action plans, which many of you may already have or already be very familiar with. We take those climate action plans and we put a finance lens on it. So that involves working out the costs, capital expenditures, and investment pathways to reach the goals set out in the climate action plans. We also pair this with place-based decarbonisation, which is more of a bottom-up approach. So as well as the top-down planning, we help cities to develop individual projects on the ground. This could be in a single sector, for example, buildings or mobility, or it could be a cross-sectoral approach. So we support them to develop these projects in a bankable manner. Specifically, our focus is developing projects in a way to attract additional private investment. We also do climate city fund scoping, so that's supporting cities to set up funds from which to raise capital from a wide variety of sources. And finally, blended finance structuring. This is very linked to the others, but it's broadly working with cities to develop financing solutions that use available public funding in the most effective manner possible, by using it as a catalyst to attract additional private finance that may not have invested otherwise. Next one, thank you. So that was all a bit of a background and a bit of an introduction, but as the focus of today is project prioritization and selection, we'll spend most of our time on the City Project Finance Framework, or the CPFF, which you can see in the middle here. So this is a tool that we're developing alongside cities to help assess bankability or investment readiness of projects, and it can therefore be used to help cities prioritize and select projects and ultimately develop a pipeline with which to engage potential investors and potential finance providers. So in terms of where this framework might sit in the context of a city's overall decarbonisation journey, so as you can see here, it's neither the first nor the last thing. Typically where we've seen it work well is where the city has not only developed a climate action plan, but has also undergone some level of investment planning at the top-down level. So I mentioned this on the previous slide, but climate investment planning is where there's been a systematic mapping of costs, of capital required to achieve what was set out in the action plan. Critically, it also works to identify the potential sources of investment to fund that action plan. And really, the climate investment plan should cover all emitting sectors within the city. So once you have that top-down view, that can also help to identify key sectors within the city where projects need to be developed and financed. So this is a good base on which to then use the City Project Finance Framework to assist with project selection, development, and prioritization. And so essentially project pipeline development. And once this is done, we can move on to sort of more detailed due diligence, development of business cases, mobilization of capital and funding, which we'll circle back to touch on at the end, actually, when we talk about next steps. So it's probably worth noting here, just before we move on, that many of the key inputs factored into the City Project Finance Framework do overlap significantly with the dual key mechanism that we heard about from Thackeray earlier. So as he mentioned, the dual key is split between the impact and the financial keys. And hopefully, as you'll see in the rest of today, these are the two of the key elements really that the City Project Finance Framework looks at as well. So I think this really emphasizes that these are the key themes and the key factors that a whole range of potential investors will consider when assessing whether projects are bankable or investment ready. So on that note, I will hand over to Renata, who will introduce the framework itself in a bit more detail.
Yes, I unmuted myself. Thank you, Christine. So I will go more deep into the City Project Finance Framework. And this is the framework and the tool that we wanted to introduce to you guys today. Yeah. So first off, I'll give you an overview right now of the City Project Finance Framework and the theory behind it. And when we go into the breakout rooms, we'll get more into the details of everything. So if I don't touch everything right now, it will come later, don't worry. First off, what does the City Project Finance Framework do? So the idea of the framework is that it gives cities a good overview of how ready their projects are to be brought to investors. So to actually get funding. This is, as Christine said, the two most important parts of this are probably what was mentioned before, the financial side and the impact side. So this is what we really look at, we try to measure, but also we look at the technology, because this is also something that we have seen investors very interested in. I'll go into that in a bit more detail. The framework is made of 8 sections. And they consist of both quantitative and qualitative questions that give cities insight into their projects. So it's also a tool to help cities better understand which projects would work best for which types of investors, because of course, as you know, there are some investors who put more value to the impact and some that want more returns. This also differs for public and private investors. And we just want cities to better understand what investors are looking at, which type of investors they could target, and just understand their own project portfolio best. The tool is made from our investor experience. So what we have seen with our background as Christine said, in both the private sector and the public sector, and talking to investors, working with investors, and the things that they find most important when looking at different projects. And then we want to help cities understand this as well, and how they can tweak their projects if there are certain areas which maybe they don't score as high in as of now, where they can put more effort and more resources into perfecting this, or making it, let's say, in the right direction, so investors can understand and can are open to investing in it. This is done through identifying the need gaps. So in the different sections, each section will be scored, and in each section you can see how you score on that section and where you could improve more. We will walk through it in more detail in a bit, and this will help them increase the bankability. The main point of the framework is the relative comparison. So it works best on a portfolio basis. So the idea is not necessarily that you have one project and put that in the city finance framework, but that you do this for your portfolio of projects or a group of projects that you're looking at. And you want to have a better overview of the relative, let's say, financial readiness, or impact readiness or technological readiness of each project. So you can see which projects you could push for funding, which projects you would need more technical assistance with, and how you want to continue to develop these. You get a score, average score for your portfolio, which we will show you in a bit. And this can be compared to the score per project. So this is how you can see relatively to the rest of your portfolio, which project would be the first one you can try to get funding for or not. Another thing to note is that the framework is very flexible and adaptable. So we're going to show you a certain version of the framework that we think is useful across different cities, but it is adaptable if your city puts more emphasis on impact right now or on the financial side. This can be tweaked as well. So it's an adaptable model. How does the city project finance framework work? So as I said before, there's different questions, and we will go through them in a little bit. The sections are called immediate and enduring impact, sustainable development, addressing need gaps, ease of monitoring, city-country readiness, technology readiness, and financial efficiency. And each section will be given a score out of 10. We will group the impact-related sections together and weigh that compared to the technology section and the financial section. So you can get a quick overview on, is this project a very impact-heavy project? And do I want to raise funding because this will really get my city much further in the goal where I want to be? So in the, let's say, getting to this environmental goal, or is this a project that is very financially strong, but we need to work on maybe finding how we can create more impact with it if this is what we're looking for. So that's why we grouped it into 3 sections. So this is a very clear overview for the city as well, and depending on what they are looking for. And the average score is based and it's weighted per section. I will go through the weights at the end. But as you will see, the financial and impact are weighted equally. Also, again, linking to the dual key philosophy of these being two very important aspects of having a successful project. Now I will walk through the different sections of the framework, and we'll show you a bit about how we looked at this and what we're looking for here. We will not go into much detail because this will be done in the breakout rooms, and we don't want to confuse you too much right now. So the first section is based on technology. This is a very important one we've seen because investors like to invest in technology that has been proven, especially if it's not investors with much technology knowledge. They don't want to take the risk of having this new unproven technology. So it depends a lot also on what your project and which stage your project is, how keen investors would be to invest in it. So this is a very important aspect to think about. The second is immediate impact. And for our definition of immediate impact, it's impact that we can see almost right away after the completion of the project. We take about 12 months into consideration, and you can think about things such as CO2 emission reduction, if this is seen quite quickly after implementation, or if you use less fossil fuels as a city, then this is where you will see the impact of that. The third one is enduring impact, and enduring impact is structural impact. So this is impact that we see in the long term. After these 12 months are over, do we still see other sources of impact that are brought on by the specific project for the city? Some ideas that we can think about here are maybe the community has better access to technology that it didn't have before, or maybe inequality has decreased or will decrease in the long term due to this new project or this new technology that has been introduced by this project. So these are also very valuable and important to take into account. The fourth aspect we look at in the city finance framework is the sustainable development. And this is more related to co-benefits. Co-benefits can be seen as benefits that are maybe not necessarily directly brought on by the project, but are good extras in a way to explain that. So you could think of improved air quality is a big one. You know, if you start using more electric cars, then this is a great co-benefit for the community as a whole. And this is also something that investors look at and value if your project brings this along. And it's very important to make sure that you are able to show this as well if you do have that. The fifth section, addressing need gaps. So the idea is here, we want to point out if there are typical needs that are often presented in a country or city that this project also addresses. So things you can think of here is, does the project help with closing needs gaps that most countries or cities face, such as helping the most vulnerable parts of the community? Or do they help with putting in specific structures that mitigate barriers to financing that are city or countrywide? So after our project, somebody else can also benefit from this. These are also important ones that could bring a lot of benefits to the city. A very important one also is the ease of monitoring. which especially if we say that a project that we are working on brings impact, investors like to, of course, see that this is indeed the case. So we can talk a lot about these great benefits that a project brings, but if there's no way to measure and monitor this, it's very hard to get investors to put money into the project that doesn't, let's say, prove anything. So it's important to think about how we can do this and how well the project is already developed on this matter, or that we need to look more deeply into how can we measure and actually monitor this and report it to the investors. The seventh aspect of the framework is city or country readiness. And this is important because investors want to understand how the city or country is being supported by, let's say, the local community. Are people open to this project? It's much harder to implement a project, especially a bit of an innovative one, if the community doesn't stand behind you. It will really help with the success of the project. Also, of course, things like regulatory policies. Are they in place to offer the best result of the project, or will this be a barrier? So kind of making sure the city is ready for this. And the last one, which is actually the more quantitative side of the framework, is the financial efficiency. And I think I don't need to explain that both public and private investors appreciate getting returns on their investment. And we want the more return you can give, of course, the easier it is to get investors. And if you score low on this, it would be good to look at the economics of the project to find a way to increase the bankability. But we look at this, of course, as one of the factors, as we were seeing before, aside from the impact. This is a very important one as well to balance both. And it also depends on the type of investor you're targeting, how far you can play with the weights of these two measures. After you filled everything in the quantitative and qualitative side of the framework, you will get a final score out of 10. The score is given for each section. And as I said before, the impact section is grouped together to make it more, to give a better overview and not get lost in having too many different sections there. So then in the end, you will have 3 scores for your impact, financial efficiency, and technological readiness, scores out of 10. Then you can, these scores will be weighted. As I said, now at a certain point, we gave impact a 45% weight, financial efficiency 45%, and the technology a 10% weight. This is adaptable. So if your city has a different view, different needs, or if you have different target investors, we can play with this to make it more adequate to your situation. But from this point, this will be then weighted with these different weights, and you will get 1 score for your project. The idea is that you will have done this with different projects in your portfolio, so you can also have a portfolio average score. As you can see in our example here on the screen, we have a portfolio average of 5. So if this project that we have put through now would score above 5, it will be an above average project. So you can understand this as this is one that's more ready to go to the funding stage than the others, which if it's a below average score, you might want to check, where am I scoring below average and where can I put more work and resources into getting it up to par and getting it to either my portfolio average or, of course, above, and give you better insight on how to work on the project to get it ready for actual investors. So this is the theoretical part. Practically, we will work with you with the actual framework. and a project. We will go through everything together during the breakout rooms sessions in a bit. So thank you.